People always ask about changing hats, and I say no, don't do that. Be yourself, be authentic, be who you are all the time, and hats are just a fashion statement.
Yeah, well, I actually completely agree, and I also do not. I also have a little bit trouble of distinguishing different roles, but it is, of course, very nice to say, okay, be authentic, be yourself, but the question is how? And to be very specific, recently you became a dean of your faculty. Mm-hmm. So there are these people, they used to be just colleagues and friends. I hope they still are colleagues and friends, and now you are their dean. So how does that feel, and how can you be authentic in this situation?
I think it's common in our field that your social life, your professional life gets messy, gets intertwined, and so I count many colleagues as friends. And but then, indeed, to go out and have an evening with a friend. Versus the next day to have to make a decision about the future of their group, or to have to sometimes balance decisions. It is certainly not easy. You must have the same thing when you're asked to review papers, for example. You work in a field where many of your, you have many collaborators around the world, and suddenly you're asked to review a paper for somebody.
Yes, absolutely, because I was thinking this is actually our daily life, right? Both education and research involve a lot of integrity questions where we have to combine the same roles. Like my community in mathematics and applied probability is not very large, and I work on network applications of applied probability. This is not a very big community, and I know most people, and many of people are my friends. And then I get a paper to referee, and you can always say to an editor that you will be clearly biased towards the topic, because, okay, if I worked on this topic, then clearly I like this topic, and clearly I know these people. But usually it's also not very easy to find reviewers in this community. And of course there are some guidelines. Okay, you shouldn't referee papers of your relatives, or you shouldn't referee maybe your papers of your current PhD student, or like yourself. Mm-hmm. But sometimes you can ask to be asked to be referee a paper of PhD student who graduated 5 years ago, for example, mm-hmm. or a friend. There is a lot of gray area in that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, review committees, that's another big one. I think you and I both get asked maybe a disproportionate amount of time to serve on juries and review committees. And more than likely there will be proposals from colleagues, from your institution, from colleagues. And of course, you need to declare that. I always do. But then to step out is also sometimes unfortunate. I mean, on the one hand, you want to be able to give an objective, also just collegial perspective, opinion on it. But how do you respect the fact that that these people are also in your department, in your faculty, and your opinion is then sort of tainted, right, by the others in the jury as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for grant proposals, the procedures are quite clearly written. So if you declare conflict of interest, then you don't participate in evaluation. But sometimes, for example, again, there is no direct conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. So it's not from your organization, mm-hmm. but it's somebody who used to be in your organization, or somebody you know because of your professional activities. And then what? And then what? And then you can claim it. I mean, I had a situation, and I said that, and I know this person. This person is not from my organization, but I know this person. So this is how I know. And they discuss, and they say, no, we don't find it conflict of interest because it doesn't fall under guidelines, so you have to participate in evaluation. I received a very negative review, so negative that I had to ask to rewrite it, because one of the authors is PhD student, and it will not be very nice to receive such a harsh review. So what this person did, because he knew these people, or she knew these people so well, this person tried to be objective, and basically has overdone it. right? So didn't like the paper, can happen, but why to be so harsh? So probably also this conflict of interest played the role. And in fact, when we discussed that, this person actually said that when evaluating this paper, it was such a strong conflict of interest that it was very hard to write this review, and maybe that's why it came out a little bit too harsh than it had to be.
Here in the Netherlands, we're very informal. We do treat each other with on a pretty equal footing, right? Your students even call you by first name, most of them. But that also implies a sort of, intimacy that sometimes makes it more challenging, right? To now to be their boss, to be a teacher versus an assessor, for example, in a class. You must encounter that.
Yeah. So this is like our core business, right? Research and education, and both are full of this everyday integrity, gray area things. Like in one article about education, I read this: how do we even get away with this? Like, we coach the students, we teach them, we train them, we try to make them better, and then we give them a grade. I mean, just think about figure skating, like as any sport. Like, if you coach a skater, you cannot say, okay, now good luck, I'm going to sit in a jury. Ideally, somebody else should evaluate my students.
Yeah.
But that is not how the system works, and we get away with this. And sadly, I think deep inside, maybe without realization, we all kind of feel this contradiction. And what happens is that definitely on the level of students, bachelor and master, I feel that we resolve this by definitely students feel us more as an examiner than as a coach, sadly.
Now, I think the awareness is key. I think recognizing that and trying to find ways to alleviate it also by bringing other people in, as we do, of course, in many assessments that we have, in projects now, the way that our education is evolving now to be more cooperative, so more people are involved. I think the level of involvement, of engagement of students in everything we do in the organization, I think helps keep us also relevant and also on check. And I think it also helps students to learn from an early phase about what really is important. I think you're absolutely right. We need to shift our way of thinking, that it isn't about a grade, it's about what we learn and how we apply that.
If you compare how integrity issues are addressed in the US, do you see a big difference?
Yeah, I do see some differences. I studied in the US, my undergraduate and my graduate studies. I think I was much more aware of it. I think there was a lot more talk about the collegial way of working, the expectations between professors and students. I know, for example, when I was a PhD student, my focus was in chemical physics. My research is in laser spectroscopy. But there you also had to, of course, take some courses to round out your education. And I was intrigued in courses in philosophy, and one in particular, which was given by the vice provost of the university, who was a renowned scientist. And I was intrigued that he was giving a course on it was in principle on cases of fraud, on scientific fraud, although he tried to give it a positive spin, and the course was called Scientific Ethics and Integrity or something. And it was a fantastic, eye-opening course. And the fact that it was given by somebody at such a high level in the organization also showed that this was really valued, that this was important, that this was emphasized for everybody. And I think we could be better there. I think we have an opportunity now to be better there. I think I didn't recognize it when I first came to the UT, that level of attention on all levels. But I do see things changing now. I think it's a great opportunity with setting up this House of Integrity, with coupling it to a lot more awareness about personal development, about diversity in our academic profiles.
In Russia, what happens, first, my experience is long ago, of course, 20 years ago, but still it is true that in Russia, a lot of master students, for example, already work and study for degree. So many people come there for the degree and not really for the knowledge. Mm-hmm. And that has implications, but they can have for many reasons. For example, somebody studies to avoid military service, okay? And as a very young starting teacher, I encountered these cases. Like, for example, I had a boy in front of me who said, if you don't give me a pass now, I will have to go to military service.
Now?
Yeah. And I'm very relieved that, for example, here, I will never hear this from a student. As a teacher, I feel a little bit more protected from that kind of issues that I have to decide about people's life, because...
You mean supported? You mean with the...
I'm by study advisors, I believe I'm very much supported, because if a student has serious personal issues, then I say always you can go to a study advisor. And if I get a message from a study advisor that the student has personal issues and needs another attempt for an exam, then of course I will give such attempt. Mm-hmm. But I do not need to decide about that.
But those kinds of dilemmas, those kinds of when there are external factors and you have to weigh different interests. I'm triggered by your story in thinking about something totally different, but about a researcher in our staff who's doing quite fundamental, pretty very curiosity-driven, you could say, research, publishing results in about real science, about very fundamental basic science. But they're getting picked up. The connections that we have here to societal problems, to real-world applications. There's a company that wants to use the results, wants to use the approach of these scientists, and wants it so badly that they want to own it. They want to, and they're willing to pay. They're willing to finance the research, to invest in it. And on the one hand, you have to think about, how does that? How do I balance that with my own scientific ambitions, my interest in simply doing my science for the sake of the science versus now the application? And maybe it depends also on the application itself. In this case, it's by a company that wants to use this knowledge into a medical treatment that could save many lives. Does that put additional fuel? How does that affect your decision then?
How do you choose actually research topics? There are integrity issues involved in that as well. Like how much should it be application driven? How much it should be fundamental driven? How much of your own curiosity you need to sacrifice for something which is like fashionable, for example?
One of our strengths is really our combinations. The cross-disciplinary approach that allows the diversity of having both in your teams and trying to on the one hand to of course do groundbreaking, fundamental, curiosity-driven research here, but to recognize that to find that balance, to also choose to make it our mission to work on problems of society and making that link and finding a way to balance interests, finding a way to serve both of them. Well, that's our challenge.
Don't fundamental scientists get like offended when you say you have to think about applications?
Yeah, but I don't think that every one of them individually has to, but I think it's in the combination. We have very fundamental scientists, we have very applied scientists, and we have everything in between. And the way that we're now clustering our scientists also in ways of creating more impact that spans that whole spectrum from fundamental to applied, approaches on important themes, on relevant topics for society.
You know, in mathematics, sometimes you experience that that some people value very much what they call theoretical research. In grant applications, mathematicians write very deep mathematical grant, and then in impact paragraph, in utilization paragraph, you are allowed to write with arguments that this theory or that theoretical development at this moment doesn't have any application. You're allowed to do that.
That's integrity.
But it is much more difficult to design a very detailed plan than to explain why there is no application. So it's very difficult to compare. I think none of this is easy, but it's very hard to compare, for example, as a committee.
A house of integrity needs lots of windows, good natural lighting for those working inside, and fully transparent for those looking in from outside.